They did lots of lines of human breast cancers, and they found that the breast cancers were able to utilize glycine much more effectively.
Does glycine feed cancer?
What they did is they said, okay, let's grow these breast cancer cells and these normal cells in a medium that doesn't have any glycine in it, and let's give them glycine.
Why does inflammation cause cancer?
Where they go in and they sort of do a roto-rooter job through the urethra. Very, very crude procedure. So they put 2% glycine in an open wound. And what happens is, if you're under care of a doctor for a medical condition, then you always have to consult your doctor about everything. That's a given.
Today, everyone, we're going to talk about something I have gotten so many questions about, and it's glycine and cancer. Does glycine feed cancer? If you take glycine, will you potentially increase your risk for cancer? And it's with Dr. Joel Brind. He is actually a glycine expert. He hates it when I say that, but it's true. He's trained at Yale and got his PhD at NYU, and he's been studying glycine for several decades, and he's the author of The Glycine Miracle. So welcome to the show, Dr. Brind. Can you talk to us about what is the relationship between glycine and cancer? Why are so many people wondering about it? What's the recent research that has people
Yeah,
concerned?
recent research is unfortunately, and some of it is misleading, and some of it is just kind of misleading because of the way that we understand cancer or misunderstand cancer because everything is so hyper specialized. Yeah, I've been selling glycine supplements, I guess, since 2011, but in 2009 there was I had already been taking glycine supplements. A paper came out from University of Michigan. They thought that in various kinds of human cancers grown in culture, that glycine would increase their growth. And in particular, there's an abnormal kind of cancer cell. It's so-called virally transformed. It's not cancer, but it acts like cancer under certain conditions. And it can become cancerous in its behavior. They're called RWPE cells. And the research showed that these cells became malignant when you added glycine to the culture medium. They started behaving malignantly like cancer. This was kind of a big deal. I tried to publish a letter, and they wouldn't publish a letter that refuted that. That's sort of a political problem within medical research. It's another story about publication. But what happened is about 5 years later, the same group very quietly kind of retracted it, sort of like. They published another paper where they said that sarcosine, when you have glycine N-methyltransferase, which takes the extra methionine methyl group and attaches it to glycine, the end product of that is called sarcosine. And they found that sarcosine increases the growth of these cancer cells and makes them more malignant. Interesting, right? When you have too much methionine, that's when you get more sarcosine, not when you have too much glycine, right?
Yeah.
Well, 5 years later, they came out with a paper which very quietly, right in the bottom line of the abstract, they said that these cells were made to become invasive and malignant in their behavior with sarcosine, but not glycine. Three magic words, but not glycine. Sort of 5 years later, very quietly withdrew that finding. Not a formal retraction or anything, but to me it was a very big deal. Because I'm a
What authors?
glycine guy.
What were the authors on that paper?
Oh, the first author was Sri Kumar, although the head of the group is Chinnayan, Arul Chinnayan. They're at the University of Michigan. And the first author of the subsequent paper from the Chinnayan group, his name was Khan, Khan. Now then another paper came out in 2011, I think, and the first author of this one, his name is Jain, Jain, Mohit Jain, published a paper saying, oh, human breast cancers. They did lots of lines of human breast cancers, and they found that the breast cancers were able to utilize glycine much more effectively than normal cells. And it's like 2/3 of breast cancer lines were able to utilize glycine much more effectively. And then they did experiments on these, and this is in culture, right? So there's caveats about going from culture to the whole body. But they said, but also in culture, what they did is they said, okay, let's grow these cells, these breast cancer cells and these normal cells, control cells, in a medium that doesn't have any glycine in it, and let's give them glycine. So when they gave them glycine, guess what? The cancer cells grew a lot better than the normal cells when they gave them glycine. They gave him a lot of glycine, 100 micromolar glycine. 100 micromolar glycine is lower than the lowest normal, quote normal, which is really too low, glycine levels that you'll find in the literature. If you go to the clinical test, sites, and you look at, say, LabCorp or whatever these, and you look at what is the normal range for glycine, and they will tell you it's about between 150 and 350 micromolar. Well, they were giving these cells 100
Below.
micromolar. So in any body, it doesn't matter what body you're in, if you have a breast cancer, it's going to have enough glycine to grow like crazy. That's not going to, trying to starve it of glycine is not going to be very fruitful, although there are people who think that's a good way to go. It's not going to matter because you can give them lots of glycine. On the other hand, there is also a physician whose name is Bob Hoffman, who's apparently now, I think in his 90s, but still practicing, who has a clinic in California. And his goal is to deprive the cancer cells of methionine. It turns out that most human cancer cells are very bad at recycling and regenerating methionine, right? Like low methylators on steroids, right? They're really like zero remethylators. They can't do it. So if you cut down the amount of methionine in the blood by adding an enzyme called methionine-ase, you can actually slow the growth of these cancers. And this man has been in practice for decades now, doing this for patients and extending their lifespan with this relatively radical metabolic treatment of methionine-ase. So then the question becomes, why is it that most cancer cells are much better at utilizing glycine and much worse at recycling methionine than normal cells? Well, for that, let's go out 30,000 feet and look at cancer and look at the evolution of cancer within someone's body. When cells become mutated and they become abnormal and they start on the road to becoming cancerous, they then undergo a selection process. What's going to end up being a life-threatening cancer? It's going to be a cell that can thrive the best in that particular environment. Well, what's the particular environment? Well, most people are glycine deficient and they have too much methionine. So guess what is going to make a great cancer cell, a most successful cancer cell that's going to make a really successful cancer? Well, by that I mean a life-threatening cancer, malignant cancer, is going to be one that thrives in an environment that's low in glycine and high in methionine. And that's exactly what we find. Most human cancers grow best in an environment that's lower in glycine and higher in methionine than normal cells. If you could possibly cut down the glycine levels to a level so low that cancer cells could not thrive, your normal cells wouldn't make it either. Because you know why? Normal cells ordinarily pump glycine as high as the levels need to be in the circulation outside of the cells. Normal cells pump glycine in so that the level of glycine inside the cells is much higher than the level outside the cells. And that's probably why inflammation in advanced age, for example, inflammation is far more life-threatening. Much more readily can you go into something like toxic shock. Because when you go into toxic shock where inflammation is really out of control, what is it that's going to stop it? If your body is fighting some really nasty bacterium like anthrax, what's going to stop it? So it goes into full-blown inflammation where the inflammatory cells literally blow up, flooding the place with inflammatory poisons to kill whatever it is that's there. What's going to limit that? The fact that when these cells blow up, they're also flooding the zone with extra glycine. But if the glycine is so low, which happens like in very advanced age, because glycine synthesis slows down with aging, slows down with obesity, then it's not going to work. It's not going to save you. It's not going to save the body from a rapid demise. Hey, guess what situation provided just that scenario recently at one of those wonderful unintentional experiments? COVID. COVID is a virus that provokes excess inflammation. So people would get a cytokine storm of furious inflammation in the lungs. Well, you might survive it, but what is it that predisposed people from going into that full-scale COVID pneumonia and death, even when they put them on ventilators? Obesity, advanced age, cancer, diabetes, low glycine conditions. So glycine is so fundamental that, sure, cancer cells need it, and they can utilize it better than non-cancer cells because they learned to grow and thrive in an environment where glycine was low, because glycine is so fundamental. When I say so fundamental, I mean there was glycine here before there was anything that lives upon the earth. Glycine is found in asteroids and meteorites and comets' tails, you can find glycine. I believe it's like the bridge between the inorganic world and the organic world. Yes, it's organic. It's an amino acid. It's used to make proteins. It's the most common amino acid in the proteins in our body. Yet, it's made inorganically. Your liver could make it from formaldehyde, carbon dioxide, and ammonia. It's made naturally in the non-living environment from those components. So, as I say, glycine, taurine, by the way, also was here before anything that lives was here. Very, very, very fundamental glycine. And by the way, some people sell glycine supplements and they say L-glycine because it's an amino acid. And when you have an amino acid, the really active natural form is the L form, not the L and the R form that's made synthetically. And so they sell L-glycine. Well, that's just chemical ignorance. There is no such thing as L-glycine or R-glycine. Glycine is glycine is glycine. It is not asymmetric. And when I say not asymmetric, most amino acids and proteins and most biological molecules, not all of them, save a few like glycine, like taurine, very few. When I say they are asymmetric, I mean their mirror image is not the same as the direct image. So, for example, your right and your left hand, are they identical? No, one's right, one's left. Your right and your left feet, they're mirror images of each other. They're mirror images. But if you think of something like a circle, right, or a star, or some radially symmetrical pattern, and you look at it in the mirror, what do you got? You got the same image. The mirror image is the same as the regular image. So when you make things synthetically, what are you going to get? If you just made it without biological materials guiding the process, but made it out of purely non-biological materials, you would get an amino acid mixture that's half of the L and half of the R, half left, half right, because they're mirror images of each other. A non-biological process will not distinguish left from right. But glycine, there is no difference left and right. It's symmetrical. It's not asymmetric. And so glycine is glycine is glycine. Somebody's selling you L-glycine. Well, it's probably okay, but they're betraying a level of chemical ignorance that would make me suspicious.
So what you're saying is that people shouldn't necessarily be afraid of glycine because even at lower than normal levels, right, they are not a problem and cancer can use it. But I think it's also important to highlight that inflammation is linked to cancer, and glycine can prevent inflammation.
Yes,
So can you
glycine
talk
prevents
about,
inflammation, and inflammation is a breeding ground for cancer. So you're going to be more prone to get cancer at a younger age and everything. Now, does that mean, glycine prevents cancer? Absolutely. Well, of course not. In fact, the mice that we use in our NIH study on glycine supplementation, glycine extends lifespan. Well, they're mice. So what do they normally die of? Well, these mice, what they normally die of is lung cancer. It's just one of the ways they die of old age, right? So what would happen typically is the cancer would grow until the mice, they can't breathe anymore, and that's why they die. What happens in the glycine-fed mice? Cancer doesn't grow as fast. Why? Because glycine is anti-angiogenic. It slows the growth of cancer. It makes cancerous tumors unable to make a new blood supply as well. And we know that also experimentally, not only from our own study on longevity, but from previous studies in mice with transplantable tumors, where you could take this transplantable melanoma. Again, not my favorite kind of research. But others have done this research where they'll take a transplantable melanoma that's easily passage from a nude mice, one that has no active immune system, basically, so they can grow this cancer. And when they treat those animals, even though they have no immune system to fight the cancer, when they treat them with glycine, they can't grow. The cancer won't grow.
wow,
So
wow.
cancer has a problem growing when there's more glycine around, not when there's less glycine around. Of course, as I say, these animals all end up dying of cancer anyway, but longer before they get sick and die. They live longer. That's the name of the game. I spoke to a doctor once. This was in the context of someone who was dying, who said, well, we can do this and we can do that. And the doctor shook his head gravely and he said, oh, but all we can do is postpone the inevitable. I said, isn't that the whole purpose of the practice of medicine?
Yeah, yeah,
It's to postpone the inevitable, meaning death. You
which we
know
all
the
will.
patient's going to die. So, well, yeah, the patient's going to die ultimately, eventually. Anyway, we all are. The whole point of medical practice is to postpone that sickness and
Ex-
death.
Yes.
You
And
know,
as
some things are just too simple for the most brilliant people to understand. I don't get it. I'm a simple guy. That's what it takes.
can you describe, you've described to me when you ovulate,
Yeah.
if it does create
Yes,
unnecessary,
cancer,
but
right.
talk about why does inflammation cause cancer? And how could glycine potentially, not saying it could prevent it, but what
Right,
mechanism
well,
could
it
that?
causes cancer because the whole what they call the inflammatory environment. That's a very active area of study because now that they appreciate that it's chronic inflammation that leads to cancer and heart disease and stroke and other chronic diseases that are now known to be rooted in chronic inflammation. It's because inflammation is a military action. It's your body's immune system is now going into full-blown military action where it is secreting poisons that are there in order to kill a disease before it kills you. Well, that can cause cancer because it's poisoning cells and cells that it doesn't kill. It'll do damage to normal tissue and it can damage them in a way that the DNA is damaged. You know how if you get a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, it says in the small print warning on the bottom, it says do not take internally. Well, one of the things that your immune cells will do internally is make hydrogen peroxide. Oh, wait, isn't that toxic? Yes, because they're trying to kill something else before it kills you. And so if you have this environment, which it's made to happen just occasionally, just as something happens to get in, just to be a short-lived response, boom, 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 get rid of that bug before it kills you, before it grows into a life-threatening mass of whether it's bacteria, cancer, whatever it is. That's supposed to be a short, acute phenomena. But chronic inflammation is because it's inappropriate to begin with, and it keeps going because these cells don't have enough of that regulatory protein. See, glycine, you say, oh, it's a biochemical. Yes, what does it do biochemically here, and what does it do biochemically there? And it's actually, in its role, one of its key roles in preventing inflammation is not a biochemical thing. It's actually acting as a gatekeeper. It opens a gate for a flood of chloride ions to come into the cell. It's an electrochemical phenomenon that keeps that switch from being thrown to turn that macrophage into what's called M1 mode. I call rend mode as opposed to mend mode. And now that macrophage, instead of just cleaning up the mess, is actually going around and actively secreting poisons to try and kill whatever it is that got in first. Like the first responders, the cops on the highway, and if there's an accident, they'll show up and they'll call ambulances, tow trucks, take accident reports, and redirect traffic until it's finally cleared up. But they never draw their weapons. They got them. They got weapons, loaded weapons, and they can draw them if they have to. Well, your macrophages do too. They actually have to go into a process of manufacturing the weapons when they get activated, but it happens pretty quickly. And then they become a different kind of animal, as it were. Now they're actively shooting up the place. And imagine if the cops did that every time there was an accident, they just drew their weapons and started shooting. Well, inside your body, that's kind of exactly what's happening when you're glycine deficient and you're suffering from chronic inflammation. Your immune system's doing just that. No wonder you have all these aches and pains and immobilities and chronic diseases and heart disease, stroke, cancer, whatever it is, in spades. Doesn't mean that this won't happen. Remember, glycine, even as a supplement, it's not a drug of any kind. A lot of people, my customers, will say, okay, well, I'll take it. My pain went away after a week. Well, that's great. And so they stop taking it. Well, hey, guess what? My pain came back. Well, yes, because it's food. They say, oh, do I have to take this all the time? Well, you have to eat every day. You want to eat for the rest of your life. It's food. It's part of the diet that has been missing. So it's easy to take it. Since we've now identified that this is the one essential compound that's there, you don't have to have all of that bone broth if you don't like bone broth as much that you want to have a quart of it a day like you're drinking all the time. A lot of people don't like it. Well, fine. Bone broth works for you, that's fine. But glycine, because it has a naturally sweet taste, although with an aftertaste, modify it a little bit, you get a nice sweetener. And it's just an easy way to do it. So I'm not averse to an easy way. Is that the most natural way? The most natural way, you go out, slaughter an animal, and boil the bones up. Well, not everybody has the time or inclination to do that. And science, that's the best of science, is that it isolates what is actually the active principle of this particular food, this particular supplement, this particular mixture of things, and it's really glycine. So as for the Glynac people, it's certainly not going to hurt you to take, to take Glynac, but I don't know. I'd like to see them do more of the research that demonstrates, in particular, why the NAC, the cysteine part of it, is necessary. So you can, you got a whole range of things out there that are safe. Now, in terms of safety, when I say you can take as much glycine as you want, there are some people who've said, they'll comment online and they'll say, oh, glycine can be really toxic, and they'll cite something like WebMD or whatever. And there's actually been no research that ever shows that any amount of glycine that you can eat will produce toxic levels. In fact, the only way you can find really, really, really high levels of glycine is first in animal studies. They'll show that, yeah, you can make it toxic if you take a syringe full of glycine and a mouse and you go and you just inject it right into its main body cavity, intraperitoneal injection. Yeah, you could probably do some damage or kill the animal that way. You probably can't eat enough glycine to cause any harm, any long-term harm. The reason I say that is because the real test is in the surgical literature. If you look at the urologic surgical literature, there is a surgery, a common surgery, still common, even though it was perfected 100 years ago. It's called a TURP, a transurethral radical prostatectomy or radial prostatectomy. I'm not sure which the R stands for. Where they go in and they sort of do a roto-rooter job through the urethra. Very, very crude procedure, very bloody procedure. And what they do is they irrigate the site, the surgical site, with 2% glycine so that it's ionically the same as blood, but it doesn't have any salt in it, right? No salt in an open wound. So they put 2% glycine in an open wound. And what happens is that the glycine levels in the blood often become astronomically high, like 100 times normal. They'll become like something like 100 millimolar instead of 100 micromolar. So, normal being, if normal is up to a millimolar, 500, 100,000 micromolar is normal. We're talking about 50 or 100 millimolar, 100 times that. And people, the worst that ever happened is some people, I think, got temporarily blind for a few hours. But the funny thing is, nobody experienced any sort of panic or pain because they had so much glycine in them. And I believe that that's why this surgery is still practiced the same way 100 years later, because men tolerate it so well. Why? Because they got so much glycine in their blood that for a week they're not going to have any inflammation from that surgery. And they heal very, very well with tons and tons of glycine in them. So there is no literature that shows that you could feed anybody enough glycine to cause any harm.
And there's no human evidence to suggest that glycine feeds cancer.
That it feeds cancer? No.
Outside of
Well,
the test tube.
again, with those particular tissue culture experiments that I described before, in a particular artificial situation, you could say,
Right.
because cancer cells need glycine too. And if there's very little glycine around, the cancer cells will survive better than normal cells. But you're never going to get a situation in vivo in a living person where the glycine levels are that low. So in an artificial situation, I can't say these results weren't valid in that particular context. But no, in terms of actually whole body stuff, no, every bit of evidence really mitigates to the opposite. Not that it isn't true, but that it's the opposite, that it's really better for preventing or even slowing. And I've had lots of customers who have cancer. And they, especially, by the way, if you have cancer and you're taking chemotherapy, what's chemotherapy? Chemotherapy is poison, right? It tries to be selective, so it's selectively poisoning the cancer cells over the normal cells. But boy, it wreaks havoc on normal cells. It causes a lot of pain and inflammation. So I've had cancer patients say, thanks for the sweetamine, because now I can tolerate the chemo much better. So it's even as an adjunct to cancer therapy, this is, again, it's anecdotal. I don't see any papers on it, but certainly I've had customers who report to me that that's the case, and it makes sense.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brind. Like I said, go read his book, drink your bone broth, get your glycine, and try sweetamine. But thank you for clearing it up. Yeah, sweetamine.
Right. And by the way, sweetamine, I put it there also because that's the name of my website, sweetamine.com. You'll find all that information there. You don't have to watch an hour-long video just to find out what it is. I hate people who promote products that way. The chronic tease, They'll tease you for an hour before they tell you what it is. Nope, I'll tell you what it is. It's glycine. One word. Glycine stops inflammation before it starts because most people are deficient in it. That's what's in my product. That's the active ingredient. And read all about it on the website. Read all about it in my book. The website's free, sweetamine.com. And enjoy life. I never wanted to be a businessman. I started this business when I was 60 years old because it was the best way to get the knowledge out to the public. Instead of just fighting with academics over getting things published, I can sell a product which gives you the opportunity to try it. Try it, and it's risk-free, by the way. If you try a 12-day challenge or you try a whole box, 30 of sweetamine, and you don't like it for any reason, just tell me. We give you your money back. You don't even have to return. If you have a serious medical condition, whether it's cancer, stroke, heart attack, and anything that you are under the care of a doctor, you should run any supplement by your doctor. And I
Always.
may think that your doctor is wrong, but I'm not, it's your doctor. I'm not a clinician. I don't give you medical advice. I'm just
He's
telling
a
you what's in the
researcher.
literature. I'm giving you the sciences, the whys, and the wherefores.
We are not giving medical advice. We are saying glycine is a deficiency. I think it's a deficiency most Americans are suffering from that's
Yeah.
creating this epidemic of inflammatory conditions. Yeah, and I just want to say too, with all sincerity, I read his book twice when I first got it, and the response on the internet has been so voluminous that I realized this is really helping people. And that's why we do these smaller episodes. It's not just to sell this product, it's because I think this is a really important topic that could improve the quality of so many lives and that not enough people are talking about. So thank you, Dr. Brind, for your work, for your product, for your book, and thanks for listening,
Thanks for
everyone.
helping me get the word out. That's really worth so much. Just in knowledge and in sparing people a whole lot of pain and suffering. That was always
Great.
my goal. Actually, I always wanted to be a cancer researcher. That was my main goal when I was 10. So that's 65 years ago.
Wow.
65 plus
So look
years
at you
ago.
now.
You know.
You're still in that area, still helping
Still, yeah,
people. So,
still working, still doing research. I just finished reading a book by Ben Franklin, and I was reading about all his inventions all through the early and mid 18th century, all the stuff he was inventing, lightning rods and Franklin stoves and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I remember Franklin. He invented bifocals, didn't he? I thought Franklin invented bifocals, and I'm not reading anything about it. A long biography, 200 pages, 300 pages, 400 pages. Finally, he invents bifocals. Why he invented bifocals when he was 78 years old? That's when he invented
wow.
bifocals. So I'm still going. I'm
Amazing.
not even that old yet, and I'm still, discovering things, and it's, that's what I'm here for.
I have no doubt.
Really,
I have no doubt you will keep it up. But thank you for everything.